Hey, I am Aubriana, host of Black in the Saddle, where we acknowledge the impact and the influence of Black people on the horse industry. In this episode, we're going to be talking about something that has kind of been a little bit of a trend over the past few episodes, but we need to talk about the future of our industry and the future of what work looks like in our industry, especially under this current administration. I'm talking about anything from trades to post-secondary education. Our current administration is not making it easy to pursue education, or the stipulations around it are more predatory and not something that this upcoming generation is willing to agree to. Unlike my generation, where they were like, go to school, get an education. You will have all the jobs and have all the money that you want. We know that's not true. And I am seeing that the next generation is not falling for it. So those of us with student loans are going to have to reckon with a lot of the upcoming changes, and we need to deal with that. I have worked in the animal health and agricultural industry since before high school. And one of the things that has allowed me to stay where I am and do good work in this space is the skills that I acquired kind of around those industries. So that's what I want to talk about today. How do we leverage the skills that we have with horses to do things that are maybe horse adjacent or serving the industry, but not in very traditional ways? I want to start off with a story. If you have listened to a few episodes of the podcast, by now you know that I was a pre-veterinary student. I said, I'm going to vet school. I love animals and I'm going to make sure they're healthy. And growing up, there was not a lot of the adults around me didn't understand what alternative career types could be or what my career options were. It was just like, you like animals, you smart, veterinarian. Like that was the pathway. And so I was put in all these STEM classes, organic chemistry, biology, calculus, all this stuff, and did fine. However, when I got to college and kind of got through college, I realized that that was not the only option. And so in order to go to vet school, you ideally are supposed to have, I think, 400 hours of experience. So you need experience in different areas. For example, research. Or you need experience being supervised by a veterinarian. So a lot of times that's working in a practice or working out in the field if you are working with a large or mixed animal veterinarian. And I think another option was like working in government or administration, something like that. Like you needed these different types of experiences, and they wanted to see that you had a well-rounded understanding of what the industry actually was. And so when I applied to vet school, I had like 1,400 hours. And that was conservative, being that I was working in an animal hospital. So every time I clocked in, those hours were accruing. So as I'm getting this experience, worked in a research lab, worked in the field, worked in government public health, as I'm getting this experience and documenting it, the only thing that I was looking at is, how can this help me go to vet school? How can this help me go to vet school? And it wasn't until being in an animal practice, when I got into business, when I got into the management side of things, that I fell in love with the business aspect of it, that I had to look back and say, now, wait a minute. What are some of the things that I have learned that can take me into something different? What are some of the things that I have learned that I can apply to this industry, but it's not exactly this? And I feel like with how things are going right now, that is what we need to keep in the minds of our youth, or even people my age in their 30s, having to figure out or pivot or think about, how can I support this passion that I love? What do I need to do to keep myself into horses? I've seen a lot of people get out of horses and have to get back in it. It's reality, and nobody should be shamed for doing what they need to do what they want to do. We haven't even touched on, going into a trade, like choosing a trade versus choosing like post-secondary education, or doing both at the same time. There are so many options out there, and I just want to make sure that we are positioning the possibilities in the horse industry as things that you can, or skills that you can acquire from other places applied to the industry that you're passionate about. And so I know many of us know horse people who have jobs that are not related to horses, because that is where the money is, or that's where the money comes from, that allows them to pay for those jobs, or to pay for those horses. So asking yourself, what are these things? What are these careers that allow you to have enough disposable income to support your horse dreams? And I'm going to be bringing on some guests to talk about some of those careers. Now, I'm going to pause for just a moment to talk about opportunities to be a guest on the podcast. I've mentioned this, I think, in the very first episode coming back, but I am wanting to hear from my people. All right. As of this week, I am accepting guests onto the podcast. Again, there is a form you can fill out on the website. If you just go to the home page, scroll down, I think it says tell your story. Click the button there and you can fill out our guest application form, and then fill it out to the best of your ability. And honestly, tell me like what about your story is something that people can learn from, or that you feel like they should remember. And once I review the applications, I'll send a scheduling link and we can get on the calendar, and it'll be over Zoom, but we will record our episode and I'll send you a link telling you when it's going to go live. So I just wanted to pause right there and say podcast guests are being accepted for this next season, which will end kind of around December. So now that we got that out of the way, what inspired me to talk about this was seeing content, because I'm trying to post more on TikTok now. I am on TikTok now, and I'm seeing, kids trying to go to college, and with the passing of the big beautiful bill, it has done a lot of things, but amongst it has changed the student loan structure and the funding structure. And then after that, I was sent a post about the cost to get into veterinary school and how it is going to be more difficult for a lot of students to pursue post-secondary education or these professional degrees because of the limitations to funding sources. And as someone who spent, most of their life thinking that they were going to be this one profession, and having to pivot and just continuously pivoting based on the skills that I have collected, like infinity stones, I just wanted to share a little bit about that and what some of the changes are, and how you can still be in the horse industry and choose pathways that make sense for you if pursuing a degree does not make sense right now, or spending money to go to trade school does not make sense right now. I get it. I completely get it. And I also want to say that I speak about vet school a lot because that's what I grew up in. And that was my connection to horses. And that's the lens that I look through for a lot of horse conversations, when we're looking at their health and safety and management and opportunities to work with them. That's just my lens, but you can apply this to literally anything that you are interested in. I'm also bringing this up because when I hosted the webinar for collegiate equestrian athletes, there were parents on there asking about how their kid can pursue this in college and pursue this sport at a higher level. They were just trying to understand the process. And, the coaches gave a lot of good insight, but also if your kid can't manage to get to this post-secondary education, if they're not going to college, that's not the conversation anymore, right? A lot of kids go into sports, AAU, club tennis and swimming and all these things for the opportunity to do that at a collegiate level, or to get scholarships to go to school to do these things. And parents are interested in learning not only how can my kid do this thing that they're passionate about, but how can they set themselves up for life so that they do the activity but also get a degree. That was a lot of the questioning and the interest coming out of that conversation. So this episode is meant to also give some perspective to those parents as well, to say, you know what, your kid can go to school for journalism and become a agricultural journalist, or go into PR, or go into writing, or go into travel journalism. Like, there's so many different things that are available to these kids. I don't necessarily believe that you need to only be going for, I like horses, I'm going to get an equine science degree. That's not the only pathway. And a lot of times, because people don't know other options, they don't share what the other options could be. Now, because we already know that there is a disparity between access to education, DEI programs being rolled back, like, it's hard out here for a pimp. But the cost of school is a conversation that needs to be had, especially when trade schools are increasing. There's still a cost to go to trade school. Encouraging kids, like, one of the things that I really enjoy seeing is the summer camps and these immersion programs where the kids are actually being able to do things or talk to professionals in the industry, because that sets a system up where they are more inclined to do things like apprenticeships or on-the-job training versus getting into some of these financially constraining agreements, and just for the sake of working with horses, or just for the sake of working with animals. There's so many careers. And that kind of came up also just with the 85 episodes that I've already, or the 85 interviews that I've already done. There's so many different career types that didn't necessarily go through school or didn't necessarily go through the traditional university system, but people learned on the job. People were apprentices. They got a job in one thing and then worked their way up. They got a job in one thing and worked their way up into a completely different type of career. And I just think that's fascinating. One of the examples I'm thinking of is Dale Johnson. You have to go and listen to his episode. He is a polo player, but he also works in tech. But before tech, he worked in railroad. Like, it's his pathway was so non-linear. And I think that we need to have a more realistic expectation of what careers look like now, because they don't look like my parents' generation. There is very seldom going to be a recommendation to stay somewhere for 25 years because we're not seeing the benefits of that. We're not seeing that anymore. And so when we want to, have horses and have land and keep all of those things, we have to do the things that are going to get us there. We have to have that disposable income. When companies like, just because they're top of mind, like Smart Equine or Coro or even the North Carolina Horse Council, when they're looking at the industry as a whole and looking at the key players, the data that is coming out about these people allows them to make decisions about what they're going to offer and where they're going to go and what their pricing is going to be and yada yada. And I'm just, in my purview, I believe that we got to better position ourselves to do what we love. And I'm not saying entrepreneurship is for everybody either, but I am saying that the skills that we develop as we are growing and learning in horses are skills that we can apply in many different places. And I just don't want you, as someone who is listening to Black in the Saddle, listening to me, coming to our events or conferences or anything like that, I do not want you to feel like if you don't have a career in the horse world, that you can't add to this conversation. So some of the skills that I developed as free unpaid labor by way of getting experience for vet school that have helped me in my career have been being able to build websites, do marketing, do social media, customer service, being able to talk to customers and understand the problems that they're observing in their animals and understanding what's possible for them to pay for as far as treatment plans, data entry and data analyzing. A lot of that was prevalent in the animal hospital, but even in the research lab, being able to look at data and then tell a story from that data. I mean, those skills are not something that ever goes away. You just apply them to different contexts. Logistics, understanding, yes, I have this idea. And how do I get from idea to the delivery? Whether it be ordering meds, keeping trucks stocked, compliance, submitting drug logs to governing bodies. Like, these things help give me a perspective around how businesses operate now. And I can pull from those experiences to say, I think you might have a problem with your delivery in XYZ. Or, I'm not going to get too far into what I do for a living. However, the point that I'm trying to make is that ask yourself, what are the skills that I have gained just from my experience, whether it be in horses, in life, in education, in apprenticing? What are those skills? And how can I apply it to a career that can help me have enough income to do what I love? Ask yourself that. Because what we were told is supposed to be the way to do things is not necessarily true. Or if you do that now, you are going to be in a much more concerning position than the people before you. Oh, one of my other favorites is, oh my gosh, I'm going to blank on her name. Andrea Davenport. She is a horse show manager. She has her own series of horse shows. I think they're dressage shows. She has been gaining her certifications, I believe, through USEF to do horse shows of particular calibers. I mean, that is something that you need so many additional skills to pull off. Being able to manage teams and manage people and hire and fire quickly. Like, now that I have a little bit of a different perspective, I think that I would love to talk to her again to see how she has evolved from I first discovered her, right? She loved horses, but at that point, you have to go back and listen to her episode, but she wasn't even riding a whole bunch. She had just gotten back into riding. And I think now when I see her online, she has been riding for several years. I mean, that was a couple years ago that we spoke. But that's nothing that was presented to me. That was not a career that was presented to me when I said I was interested in horses, right? So I think exposing our kids to some of these very unique, if you know, you know, if you weren't there, you don't, going into photography, horse show photography, equine photography in general. I know several photographers that are photographing horses for magazines. And oh my goodness, Steven Pelzer, he just announced that he is going to be videographer, photographer for some horse show, but he's working with a broadcasting company to do that as a photographer and videographer. Go back to his episode, because when I talked to him, he was working in medical insurance, medical products or something. He was doing something, and he just picked up a camera and was doing this on the side, so those examples of people who did what they had to do what they want to do, and also utilize the skills that they have from other places to get better careers and more unique and more fulfilling careers in the horse industry, that just has to be a bit more realistic of a way to think about the future of work in our industry. That also, that doesn't even cover the things that we really need, right? Like farriers. My initial understanding of farrier work was you learn by being an apprentice. And then I discovered there were farrier schools. And then I started working with a farrier that was an apprentice who started doing more medical shoeing, or, helping horses get through things like founder and sport horse injuries by working directly with a veterinarian to do different types of shoeing, corrective shoeing. That's what it's called. Jesus Christ. Sometimes words escape me, y'all. corrective shoeing. But that pathway and being known for something and finding something that you like in unconventional ways. I mean, we are to the point where you can live as many lives as you want, reinvent yourself as many times as you want and need to do the things that you love. I also just want to emphasize that no one can validate the path that you are on. You know, being in horses is not easy. Making a living from horses is not easy. Making a living elsewhere and spending it on horses, it's not easy. None of this is easy. And I don't think we came here because it was easy. We came here because we loved who we become. We love who we have become because of the horses and because of the work and our ability to push ourselves farther because we have goals with the horses, or because of the community around the horses, or because of just the sheer curiosity and wanting to experience all sorts of things with the horses. No one else is going to be able to validate that experience but you. I remember when I was in college, I did the foaling and breeding internships at my university at the equine education unit. And I just knew, like, I was going to be a neonatal theriogenologist. I was going to work with reproduction cases with horses and support the babies, the foals that are dropped, because sometimes they're not all healthy. And that was fascinating to me, learning about their immunology and the IgGs and all the testing and the importance of colostrum and all this stuff. Fascinating to me. But there was not a space, I could not find a space for me to learn that on the job after university. You know, so I did what most animal science students do and work. Not most animal science students, I won't say that. I did what a lot of animal science students did and just worked in an animal hospital, right? But although I didn't pursue that as a career, I have friends who are starting their horse operations and interested in breeding, and I can take some of that information, not necessarily telling them what to do or what is right and wrong, but to say, hey, did you think about this? Like, these are some of the things that you should keep an eye out for as you are going through this breeding process with your horses. Or your veterinarian said this, but you didn't quite understand it. Let me see, and let me help you translate that to something that you can't understand. That is still fascinating to me. It's still fascinating to me. And as I work with, businesses in my own life that are doing those kinds of things, or serving clients in reproductive ways, I can understand what they are saying. Say I need to do social media for them, or I needed to work on their marketing or release a press release for them. Say I had to do those things. I actually have a little bit of an inkling of what they're saying versus someone who has zero clue about the context of the information and says something or writes something incorrectly. Or like I tell people, I can tell immediately when a non-horse person has built a website based on the photos, because no self-respecting horse person is going to have images of like horses on a website and their ears like this. They're not gonna have mares like on their website, even if they're like, oh, that looks cool, you know, non-horse people like, oh, they look cool. That's not cool. They're angry. Those are not attractive ears. We need perky ears only in these photos. That is the discernment that I can only have based on my experience, right? So as you are going into, you know, just life and enjoying life and experimenting and seeing where your passions call you, don't forget that you are learning so much more than you could ever imagine. You know, I know I've been, you know, peeping around the landscape, and I've seen a lot of like working students and people being assistant trainers, things like that. Don't just confine your learning to what you're learning with the horse. You can take that with you. You always need that. You always need that. But what are some of the other things that you are learning? How are they interacting with their clients? How are they communicating the value of the animal? How are they managing international sales and communications? How are they managing shipping horses from elsewhere or within the US? How are they managing their biosecurity? What kind of SOPs are in place? Standard operating procedures or rules and guidelines are in place to make the farm run successfully? Or what's not in place? And how can you figure out what would make it work better? Thinking a little bit differently about what it is that you are learning in those spaces is going to carry you so much farther than I came here for this one thing and I'm gonna learn this one thing. So that is what I wanted to share with you today. You know, we are dealing with a much larger level of uncertainty in our lives at this point. More uncertainty than I've ever experienced, you know, in my generation. I know that based on the data for this podcast, I have a lot of women listening from ages 25 to 45. So I fall right in the middle of that. So this may be something that is, you know, way past a level of interest for some of you and super interesting to others of you. And that's okay. And that's okay. I just didn't have somebody to tell me this when I was growing up. And the people around me, my parents, my educators, they operated the best they could. They advised me the best they could. So I'm just sharing what I know now, and some of the things that I feel like would have helped me be more intentional about my pathway and to save money and learn on the job, get on the job training. Or, you know, I save money now just by my farrier taught me how to trim my own horses, because I only have one horse and a mini, and she was like, baby girl, when we first started, I was a beginner. Now I'm coveted. I'm not coming out for one horse and a mini. All right. And that's valid. I appreciated her honesty. And she was a woman. So I'm like, hell yeah, girl. So she taught me. She was like, if you're in a pickle, you need to learn, you need to know how to do this. And and still to this day, I just saw her in April for my annual like reset trim. And she gave me one of her old rasps. And I was like, look, too dull for me, perfect for you. Use it. And so maybe that's the cheat code also. It's not even a maybe. Identifying the skills that will help you in more ways than one, but also identifying the people that can help you in more ways than one. We'll do a whole different episode on that, but I appreciate you tuning into Black in the Saddle podcast today. I know this wasn't a super horse heavy episode, and once we get more guests on the podcast, we will ring it back in. But you know, these first few episodes were some things that I needed to get off my chest after a long time of not chatting with y'all. So I really appreciate it if you got this far. And yeah, fill out the application to be a guest on the podcast. Like where you should like, follow where you should follow, subscribe where you should subscribe, and rate the podcast on podcast players so that more people can get this information. If there was something that you found valuable from this episode, share that with me. Let me know so that it can help inform some of the topics that I discuss later on in the season. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next week.